Well, good morning. Thank you for joining me in this video. I want to continue the thought that we began a week or so ago about strategies in a challenging market. And I want to look at a second idea now, and that's rent to own. Rent to own. You know, the toughest part for a first-time buyer always is coming up with a down payment. We're just not built to save, most of us. We have money come in, the money flows back out. And so you can have a real good candidate as far as credit worthiness, and they're really good as far as being tenants and looking after property, but they just can't come up with a down payment. And so they continue on being tenants, but they really would like to get into the ownership of property. And the seller may be an investor or a speculator who's looking at cashing out. He wants to sell his property, and he doesn't really need the money right away, but he wants the security that he knows is looked after. And if he thinks the market's sliding, and it may be for the next little while, he wants to peg the price today. And so he's looking seriously at a rent-to-own situation. Maybe the property's a little harder to sell for whatever reason, and so he's offering this as an incentive. And certainly, as a realtor, if we can advertise rent-to-own, the phone's going to ring. People are interested because they recognize the advantages. So how do we structure the deal? How do we make it happen when we've got the right candidate and the right property that we're going to move forward on rent to own? The first thing you need to understand is you're going to be doing it as an option to purchase. The Ontario Real Estate Association has forms, and there's an option to purchase form. And so it's going to have a fixed closing date. So when the tenant moves in, I would suggest you give them 2 years until closing date. And that gives them time to amass a down payment by way of rent. And here's just a rough way I would suggest structuring it. Let's suppose market rent was $2,000 a month. Then I would have the owner of the property / landlord charge them $3,000 a month. It's a forced saving. They're going to have to tighten their belt, but it's a forced savings because I would then say, but $1,500 of that $3,000 every month is going to be credited to you toward the down payment. And so at the end of 2 years, you will have $36,000 in an account, if you like, to go against the purchase price. Real positive incentive for the buyer, but it's also a positive incentive for the seller because he's getting $3,000 a month rent when he would normally get about $2,000 a month rent. Now, when the deadline comes along, the tenant has two choices. He can either proceed with the purchase or he can choose not to, or maybe he's unable to. If he moves ahead with the purchase, then he's got that $36,000 down payment on a $700,000 purchase. That's 5%. He's automatically saved the 5%. And you can argue it is savings. He was paying this much to the landlord, and the landlord was holding it on his behalf. If he chooses not to move ahead, then the whole $3,000 every month is deemed to be rent. The tenant gets no credit. One of the things you have to decide when you structure this deal up front is you have to decide, does in the event that they don't go ahead with the sale, does the owner of the property want this potential buyer to continue as a tenant? And you need to structure that in the deal. If you don't do anything in the deal, and you just have an option to purchase, and he's paying $3,000 rent, then he would be continuing on an overholding month to month, paying $3,000 a month. If you don't want to do that because the owner of the property says, if he's not buying it 2 years from now, I want the property vacant, and I'm going to decide at that point what I'm going to do with it, maybe depending on the climate of the marketplace, maybe put it back on the market on a regular sale, not sure, then you need to put in the agreement that you structure, the option to purchase, that the tenant shall not become a tenant under the provisions of the Residential Tenancies Act, and he's solely occupying the property to expedite a sale. So you need to address that at that time. Now, as I said a week or so ago, in terms of the terms you get, make sure that you're working on market price. I've seen it horribly misused. I've seen it on a couple of occasions where the seller, I know in one case at least, the seller was a realtor, was asking about double the value of the property, and the property was in terrible disrepair, and the landlord knew he couldn't sell it to anybody else, but because people were desperate and they really wanted to own a property, he was able to do that, and it really is unscrupulous to do that. You want to sell it at market value. You let them know that the rent is increased above market rent, and it's done that way as a savings. And you also say, and I would build it in as I explained, and the landlord's contributing so much to this as well. And so the advantages and disadvantages for the landlord, if this deal goes together, he's contributing $12,000 toward the sale, because if the market rent was $2,000 a month, he's actually only collecting $1,500 as rent, and $500 together with the $1,000 upcharge is going to be attributed to the buyer as savings. And so he's contributing $12,000, but he's pegging the price now, and if the market slides a little bit, he's taking advantage of the higher price, and he's gambling on the one side that if the tenant doesn't move forward, he's going to be picking up an extra $24,000 above market rent over that 2-year period. So it's very good for the person who's the tenant slash buyer, because it allows him to get into the marketplace, whereas he otherwise might not be able to. He walks in with some automatic equity because of the forced savings, and it's not his forever home, but now as equity builds, as he pays down the mortgage after he puts a regular mortgage with the bank on the property, then the next time around he's a repeat buyer, not the first time buyer, and the down payment isn't a problem. So it's really a win-win-win if you can find the right property and the right seller who is able to do that. I hope that makes sense. I want to thank you for taking the time to share this video, and we'll talk again next week.